Coming of age movies have become a common genre in the modern era. They encompass a time of change that literally everyone goes through in their lives, when we sort of shed this idea of childhood innocence and begin to understand the world around us in a more critical lens. We can relive a time of such like dramatic change in our lives through the lens of media, movies, TV shows, books, etc., that kind of take us back and feel very nostalgic. And a lot of these stories are sort of about the small realizations, you know, as they relate to our perceptions of self and our interests and our likes and our dislikes. And kind of given the turbulent nature of this time, it's pretty commonplace to see girlhood represented in this. Cherry flavored chapstick, picking dandelions, braiding hair, silly bands, all iconography of an idea called girlhood, an indefinable concept in nature and deeply complex. It is simultaneously terror and wonder. These movies and TV shows strive to teach us something about what it means to grow up and how our childhood frames our futures. Using broad strokes, they hope to provide insights and comfort to those who have either experienced or are actively experiencing these changes. Girls can find understanding in the representations that they see on screen. People just like them going through similar issues and again experiencing this massive change in their lives. From IndieWire, girlhood and teenhood are some of the most exciting and dynamic times in a girl's life. In some ways, these periods define not just who we will become, but also how we will see ourselves in the future. From films like My Girl to 13 to Edge of 17 to 8th grade, Hollywood has begun to understand the impact and importance of this type of representation. Though these portrayals of girlhood and youth can be comforting to girls and female-identifying people, there's a somewhat skewed nature to them in what they choose to hone in on, and they're often the more stereotypical facets of what is perceived as feminine. One of the most glaring issues with representation of girlhood in coming-to-age movies is this focus on the idea of what being a girl is. Many of our favorite coming-of-age teen movies focus on the outward appearance of female-identifying people. Many times the solution to a character's problem lies in their appearance and not in actually working on something or overcoming some change. They really aren't having to learn anything new, but instead get a whole new wardrobe, put on some makeup, and suddenly their problems vanish. Though many of these representations aren't meant to be like against women, this trend of portraying like these girlish interests instead of focusing on the nuances of girlhood is kind of demeaning to what being a girl is and damaging to young girls' minds in the long run.
Unfortunately, when all these transformations go the same exact way, the makeover montage becomes a tool that the media uses to emphasize this very rigid, one singular form of beauty. They're saying you either have these traits or you're not beautiful.
The focus on the appearance can kind of teach young women that people only care about what they look like on the outside and their appearances are the only thing that's relevant. And it's okay to have characters who enjoy that aspect of life. They like to put on fancy clothes and they like to wear makeup. Like, this is not an evil idea. But when we position appearances as a solution, it diminishes the importance of personal growth and interest, especially when in the context of romantic relationships. Romance is a great plot device to teach audiences what it means to love and how our relationships can play an important role in our lives. Again, a great element of storytelling. It isn't technically a bad thing, but when married to the idea of appearance being the most important thing in someone's life, it teaches and shows young women that they must focus on their appearance in order to attract a significant other, which more often than not is a male.
I feel like these kinds of sequences get into young girls' heads, whispering to them like, hey, don't you wish you were her? Hey, if you looked like her, boys would turn their heads for you too.
Though it may not be the purpose of the movie, oftentimes these teen and coming of age movies, the pursuit of the relationship is like the only goal for the female character. Like, she may have her own ambitions and talents outside of this relationship, but we scarcely see them placed above her desire for a relationship. Again, relationships and appearances are common elements of lives, but it's a complete oversaturation of the coming of age market to the point where, like, up until recently with these sort of like A24 indie approaches, they were really the only images that we had been given. And speaking of that, yeah, notice what these all have in common. While each of these movies tells a different story, the portrayals are completely homogenous, and the genre will oftentimes exclude girls from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Some of people's first choice coming of age movies, The Lady Bird, 8th Grade, Clueless, 10 Things I Hate About You, etc., revolve around white heterosexual characters. And while some of these characters are perceived as universal and universally loved and adapted into people's lives, they lack the nuance and sort of intersection of like multiple identities, making the general perception of girlhood very narrow. Many times, non-white characters don't even get to participate in the typical version of femininity, even though I spent the first half of this video kind of talking about how that idea can be damaging. They don't even get to participate and instead have to focus on battling these really heavy themes like racism and trauma and overcoming this type of stuff. They don't even really get to be considered girls in that way and instead have to just focus their energies on the trauma. The YouTuber Basic Girl says it a lot better than I could.
However, not every single piece of media surrounding Black people has to be about Black hardships. And so I just want it to be about a gal and her group of friends just living their lives like any other white coming of age main characters would do.
Because we don't allow space for diversity in the sort of typical formula for coming of age movies, it sets a precedent that non-white and more often than not Black girls don't really get to experience girlhood and are kind of just instantly adults and perceived as more mature. Because their girlhood is inaccessible to a wider audience, they don't get the privilege of being seen as the children they are, which is a very damaging narrative in the long run that has implications in the real world. The common phrase representation matters is common for a reason. People need to see characters that look like them, act like them, talk like them, think like them. It gives them a sense of belonging and shows that their story, their perspective matters.
Imagine empowering a young person to believe that they belong, so much so that they genuinely thrive in spite of prejudice. Now, that should be the norm, shouldn't it? But it's not the norm. Every day, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic children are educated without seeing themselves in the curriculum or their environment.
Without these representations, self-imposed limitations begin to challenge hopes and dreams. So how do we change this?
But imagine a world where everyone was recognized and respected and acknowledged in all aspects of life. Isn't that a world that we all deserve? Representation really matters.
Statista says that the average time consuming digital media for an adult in the United States is 8 hours a day. Mass media has power that it has the potential to change and challenge sort of the perceptions of what youth and girlhood are, specifically the ideas of like, what is girlhood? What is non-white girlhood? What is a diverse girlhood? Hence representation.
The truth is, if we could just believe in the contributions of others and appreciate them, we would soon see the value in everyone.
While it's important for people to see themselves in film, it's also more important that people are able to see others in film and learn and understand stories that are unlike themselves to broaden their perspective. As I wrap this up, I think it's important to acknowledge that like I don't have a personal issue with a lot of the movies that I've shown. I love these movies. I watch them regularly. I unabashedly love a beauty montage and a wardrobe change. The outfits are iconic, and I am a sucker for a cheesy romance. But if we're able to, it's always good to take a step back from the media that we consume and understand sort of the broader implications of what they represent. Like, none of these movies that I've talked about really seek to comment about women's place in society and undermine them, but they have a lasting impact on our youth, and I think that's worth unpacking. Like, your favorite coming of age movie does not have to be a 3-hour think piece on the horrors of girlhood, though there is a space for that. It's just important to recognize the patterns that we see in movies and films today so we can foster genuine change.